Hello, my name is Neal Delmonico. I am a longtime member of the Missouri Folklore Society, and I am presenting a paper this year entitled The Strange Story of Dadhici and the Horse's Head. I'm kind of the resident, or you might say token South Asianist in the Missouri Folklore Society. In the past, I've presented papers on aspects of the folklore and mythology of India and tried to compare them and contrast them with the similar stories from the Native Americans here in Missouri or in close places. This year, I am focusing primarily on this story of Dadhici with comparisons from time to time to similarities in Native American beliefs and practices. In the past, I've talked about dogs. This year, I will talk about horses. I have a fairly long paper, and I don't think I can possibly read it in a short enough time. The paper will be posted and a link available. So if you want to read the full text, then it should be available to you. I'm just going to read some sections here. To start off, let me say a few words about Dadhici. In this presentation, I am shifting my attention to horses. During the course of my studies this year, I discovered stories in which horses play important roles. There can be no doubt about the importance of the horse to both the ancient culture of India and that of more recent Native Americans. The ancient story of Dadhici is as old as 3,000 years or perhaps older, and provides a number of fascinating folk motifs, many of which are shared with cultures around the world, including those of many Native Americans. There can be no doubt about the domestication of the horse as a major milestone in the development of human civilization, and part of this story touches on what horses came to represent symbolically around the world. Who was Dadhici? Well, we're not entirely sure. Different texts say different things about him. All agree, however, that he was the son of Atharvan, said to be the author or compiler of the Atharva Veda, the fourth and latest of the Vedas, which are the most ancient sacred texts of India, dating back to, well, it's hard to pin it down, but roughly 1200 to 800 BCE. The Atharva contains many spells for obtaining various objectives, like the love of a special woman, the destruction of one's enemies, the protection from accidents, evils, and sins. Dadhici, who is also called Dadyang or Dadyanch in some texts, was born from Atharvan's wife, Shanti, or according to an alternative opinion, from Chiti, another of Atharvan's wives. He and his father are said to be the initiators of fire ceremonies, which are very important in the ancient religious practices of India, and of the Soma rites. Now, Soma is a kind of mystery. We're not sure exactly what Soma was, but it seems to have been some sort of drink prepared from herbs that may have been intoxicating or psychedelic. So Dadhici is referred in 6 hymns of the oldest text of the Hindu tradition, the Rig Veda, which is dated to about 1200 to 1000 BCE. And he's featured in a story from India's great epic, the Mahabharata, or Great Bharata, which is dated to about the 4th century BCE, and then also mentioned in the Bhagavata Purana, which is much later, 8th to 10th century CE. A portion of the Yajur Veda, the third of the 4 Vedas, is also ascribed to Dadhici. His wife was Swarcha. His son was another famous sage by the name of Pipalada. He also willingly gave up his life for the sake of the gods, Indra, the king of the gods, and the rest, so that Indra could have his backbone, which I guess was extraordinarily strong, made into a thunderbolt weapon in order to face Indra's most powerful enemies, the demons headed by Vritra. And there is a picture of that, which I apparently forgot to reproduce. At any rate, this story, however, of his giving up his life for the benefit of the gods is not part of what we'll talk about today. We're talking about another episode in his life. So that's the story of Dadhici's to the Ashvins. The story of Dadhici as a teacher is hymned in the Rig Veda in one of the hymns to the twin gods, his students, the Ashvins. The commentator on the hymn, Shayanacharya, fills the story in. The 12th verse of hymn 116 of the first circle of the Rig was something like this. Tad vam nara sanaye dangsa ugram avishkarno miyanyaturna vrishtim adyang hayad madvatarvano vam ashvasya shirshna prayading uvacha. I reveal, O you 2 men, that incredible deed for your gain, like thunder in clouds reveal gain. How Dadyang, the son of Atarvan, taught you both the honey wisdom by means of the head of a horse. Sayana's commentary on this verse tells the following story. Indra, the king of the gods, taught Dadhici the Pravargya wisdom of fire ceremony and the honey wisdom, and warned him that if he taught those secret teachings to anyone else, he, Indra, would cut his head off. Then, at a later time, the Ashvins, who wanted to learn wisdoms and who were expert surgeons, came to an agreement with Dadhici to cut off his head and put it safely aside and replace it with the head of a horse. With that horse head on his shoulders, Dadhici taught the Ashvins the hymns, the songs, the mantras related to the Pravargya fire ceremony, and the lore establishing the honey wisdom. Indra found out about it, and as promised, cut off Dadhici's head with this thunderbolt. Then the Ashvins, as they previously promised, restored his own head to his body. So what are these wisdoms, and why choose a horse's head to reveal them? The 2 wisdoms in question are a rite called the Pravargya rite and a teaching called the Honey Wisdom, a collection of 15 meditative verses that were incorporated into the 2 oldest of the Upanishads. The Upanishads are texts of secret teachings. the Great Forest teaching and the Hymn Singers teaching. These are the names of the two Upanishads. The mantras, or sacred chants, the rite are given in a text called the White Yajur, and in Book 14 of the Shatapatha Brahmana, mythological background of the rite and instructions for its performance are given. Thus, whatever their status once was, they are no longer secret teachings anymore. The story of the transmission of these two wisdoms serves to call attention to them as, in a sense, turning points for new revelations in the ancient Vedic tradition. The Pravargya rite is treated in the last set of the chapters of the Yajur Veda, leading to the final chapter, the Ishopanishad, or the secret teaching on the Lord, which replaces the old world view of the ceremonialists for worldly gain with a new concern for ultimate meaning and release or freedom from worldly bondage. It signals a turn away from action or ritual to knowledge as represented by these wisdoms and the knowledge texts that follow them, that is, the Upanishads. The Pravargya rite is the preliminary rite for the Soma ceremonies. Soma is regarded as the elixir of immortality, the drink of the gods that gives them their power, longevity, and wisdom. Wisdom seems to be also about Soma. The offerings of heated milk in the Pravargya rite are for the Ashwins who, as healers, rescuers, and rejuvenators, bring about regeneration in those they help. That seems to be the objective of the Pravargya rite. I will discuss that in more detail. But first, who are these students, the Ashwins? The Ashwins, or horsemen, are twins who are described as physicians of gods. They are also called the Nagas, the meaning of which is unclear. They are of a much older set of myths related to the Proto-Indo-European. They are first mentioned in another part of the world, in what is now Turkey, in a treaty between two kings who lived roughly in the middle of the second millennium BCE. So they are part of the Indo-European culture, which spread throughout the world, primarily heading from somewhere in the middle in southern Russia to the west in Europe, and then also some south to Persia and to India. There's a beautiful image of the birth of the Ashvins. They were the twin sons of the sun god and his wife, who had on occasion taken the forms of horses to make love. And here is the picture of the birth of the Ashwins. You can see the horses there, and down in the middle there, two boys just born. Now, this is quite a lovely image from some of the collections of miniatures, Indian miniatures, and sometimes the Ashvins are represented as having horse heads. I'm having trouble figuring out how. There we go. So the Ashvins are already connected with horses, and they are um, uh, sometimes described as horsemen in the sense of owning horses or um, uh, cultivating horses, and sometimes they are represented as being half horse and half human. Um, so, what's the significance of the horses in India? Why did the Ashwins replace Dadhici's head with that of a horse? Now, Hinduism is full of gods who have heads of various animals. There are the joyful god and remover of obstacles, Ganesha, who has the head of an elephant. Then there is the avatar or descendant of Vishnu named Narasimha, who has the head and claws of a lion and the body of a man. Vishnu has descended, according to various Hindu scriptures, as a fish, as a tortoise, as a dwarf. He's also descended as Hayagriva, the horse-headed man. Still, the Ashvins could have transplanted the head of any animal or human being onto Dadhici's shoulders. They must have chosen the head of a horse for some reason. In ancient India, the horse had a special meaning and symbolism. The horse to have stood for power, especially royal power, as indicated by the empire-building ritual known as the Ashvamedha, or the horse sacrifice. As part of this enormously costly ritual, a horse representing the king who is financing the rite is turned loose to wander wherever it wishes, followed by the king's army. If the horse wanders into the kingdom of another king, the king has a choice. Either he challenges the owner of the horse to a battle, or he accepts the other king as his lord and agrees to pay tribute to him. If the invaded king chooses to fight but loses, then he becomes a vassal of the invading king and pays perhaps a steeper tribute to him than he would have if he had simply accepted in the beginning. In this way, over the course of a year, the horse wanders freely, winning submission from neighboring kings and accumulating an empire for the king he represents. Thus, the horse is a substitute for the king, commands the respect, and stands for authority. Much of the shift from ritual to knowledge mentioned earlier was engineered by the Rajanya, or the kingly power, as is evident in the roles played in the new literature known as the Upanishad of kings. At the actual sacrifice, at the end of the year, the horse was sacrificed, presumably in place of the king, solidifying the horse's role as a substitute for a king. So the horse represented kingly power, and also one of Vishnu's incarnations is as the horse-headed one, and the role he plays in that incarnation is to recover the lost Vedas, the Vedas that had been stolen by two demons from the creator god Brahma. And so, again, the horse plays a role as the protector of the Holy Writ. In these two functions, the horse had this symbolic meaning and makes some sense in the case where a secret doctrine is to be taught to the students. Now, I'm running short of time. The two wisdoms that are taught by Dadhici to the Ashwins. The one is a ritual in which there is yet another decapitation. The Pravargya rite is based on a myth that is told in one of the commentarial texts, in which a god identified as Vishnu was attending a sacrifice with Agni, Indra, and the other gods. They all agreed to share whatever benefits they accrued from it. Mukha seems to, or Vishnu seems to have gained the most glory and appeared to be preparing to leave without sharing it with the others. The other gods surrounded him but were reluctant to attack him. Vishnu stood there leaning on his bow, watching them. Meanwhile, a group of termites approached the gods and asked them what they would get if they were able to chew through Mukha's bowstring, or Vishnu's bowstring, and disarm him. The gods responded that they would give food aplenty, protection for the rest of their lives. The termites then snuck up on Mukha and chewed through his bowstring. The bow snapped straight, catching Vishnu's throat and severing his head from his body. His head is identified as the main pot in this ritual, and after it is filled with that is offered to the Ashwin twins, they in turn reconnected to Vishnu's body at the end of the rite. So this story of the ants and their ability to behead the great god Vishnu, the gods, that is to say the Ashwins, reconnected at the end of the rite. So the Pravargya rite seems to be about the regeneration of a person who has been damaged in the beginning, who's literally lost that. Now, the Madhu meditation is a meditation on the interrelatedness and interdependence of all things in existence, and on the forces that draw us to those things. Madhu means honey and stands for the attractive force, a sweetness and nourishment that is at the basis of attraction and love. In a related but secondary sense, it stands for Soma, the elixir of immortality, and thus the immortal and eternal aspect of things, however one may conceive of them. For ancient Hindus, there is the belief in a deeper self that animates the body substances we see around us, but which is separate from them. Its presence and departure is the difference between life and death. This self, or Atman, is described as a shining, immortal person. Even the earth is animated by such a self or person, to whom we are all related and to whom we are all drawn. That person is the honey that draws us to it and animates in the recognition that we are one with that person. Otherwise, attraction, what attraction can there be towards simple the physical body? So I'm going to read a few of the verses of this honey. There are 15 verses that are available. The first is, "This earth is honey for all creatures, and all creatures are honey for this earth. This shining, immortal person who is this earth," and with reference to oneself, shining, immortal person who is in the body, he indeed is just this soul, Atman, this immortal, this Brahman, this all. And then the second verse is, "These waters are honey for all beings, for all things, and all things are honey for these waters. This shining immortal person who is in these waters, and with reference to oneself, this shining immortal person who is made of semen, he is this soul, this immortal, this Brahman, this all. And so it goes on through the various elements. The fire, the wind, the sun, the quarters, the moon, lightning, thunder, space, law, the truth, mankind, and then the soul. It ends with, verily this soul is the overlord of all things, the king of all things. As all the spokes are held together in the hub and felly of a wheel, just so in this soul all things, all gods, all worlds, all breathing things, all selves are held together. So to conclude, I've run over a bit, I'm sorry. Let me point out some of the important folk motifs in the story of Dadhici. Among those are the divine twins, the Ashwins, who are helpers and healers. Several Native American traditions have mythologies and tales involving primordial twins who shape the emerging world in varying ways, some good, some evil. Moreover, the Ashwins as healers represent the medicine men of the native traditions, collecting medicine or secret wisdom that can be used to help others that are generally beneficial to the tribal group as a whole. Then there is the horse, the domestication of which was a major step in the evolution of human society and civilization, with the advantages the horse gave to human groups in the form of quicker travel and communication between disparate human settlements, and rapid transport of troops. The consolidation of power and control in the hands of a few became possible. Large kingdoms and empires were born, more easily organized and defended. The horse thus contributed to the growth of kingly power, which in India de-emphasized ritual and emphasized knowledge instead. A new world view was gradually introduced. As a result of the emphasis of knowledge over ritual, there arises the danger and dilemma of teaching. Danger of teaching certain subjects under threat from more powerful forces who recognize an advantage to them of keeping certain topics off the curriculum. In Dadhici's case, Indra, king of the gods, threatened him with decapitation and certain death if he divulged the secrets of the two wisdoms he had been taught. Indra's fear was that if people learned the secrets of Dadhici, the secrets Dadhici had to offer, would give them powers and defenses only he should have, and it would upset the flow of ritual offerings from ordinary people to the gods, offerings on which they depended. There is a famous passage in the Great Forest Teaching in which people who see duality between themselves and the gods are described as the angels or beasts of burdens of the gods. Those, however, who see no duality between themselves and the gods, the message of the Madhu wisdom, recognize that they are under no obligation to serve or make offerings to them. They are free. Then there is the peculiar role of decapitation in the story. The doubt is never raised that if one removes someone's head, he or she might lose whatever knowledge or memory they once had. The head was not regarded as the seat of thought or memory in ancient India. It seems to have been regarded more as an audio attachment through which one might speak and presumably hear others, what others have to say. One is reminded of Aristotle's view in his works on biology, that the brain was just an elaborate organ for cooling, meant primarily to cool the body down. In India, knowledge instead belonged to the shining immortal person who is separate from the head or the body or any other physical thing. Thus, whether it be a horse's head or a lion's head or the head of an elephant, one's knowledge, memory, or identity were not impacted. Finally, the structure of the Pravargya rite is that of an initiatory physical deconstruction and regeneration that is common among shamanistic traditions around the world. In India, it is connected with one of the creation hymns of the Rig Veda, known as the Purusha Sukta, in which a primordial giant is dismembered and his parts become various elements of the world. The moon is born from his mind, from his eye comes the sun, from his breath comes the wind, and so forth. Naturally, the logical undoing of creation is the reversal of the process in the reassembly of the Purusha's body, as we have seen in the ending of the Pravargya rite. In a later version of that primordial sacrifice in the great forest teaching, the Purusha person is replaced with a horse. Thus, the horse whose dismemberment provides the material, it is a horse whose dismemberment provides the material for creation. The text says, "Verily the dawn is the head of the sacrificial horse, the sun his eye, the wind his universal fire his open mouth." Thus, a horse's head, though a surprising choice at first glance, seems strangely appropriate to sit on Dadhici's shoulders as he dispenses secret wisdom to his two eager students. And that's all I have to say. And thank you for listening. I hope it was not too confusing. A lot of Sanskrit words, a lot of technical terminology. At any rate, the paper will be available if you are interested in reading it over more closely. Thank you, and good day.